They didn't ask you to save them, but you believed that was your purpose. You spent your whole life trying to keep them together. You became the emotional sponge, the peacekeeper, the one who never complains, all in the name of love. But what if love, in your case, was actually a trap? What if your deepest wounds aren't from what they did to you, but from what you accepted in order to stay loyal? Carl Jung called this the shadow, and most of us live in it, confusing pain with connection, guilt with responsibility, and trauma with identity. This isn't just about your childhood. It's about how that childhood became a mission you never chose. A quiet belief that your role is to carry everyone's sadness, silence your truth, and sacrifice yourself so they don't fall apart. But let's get honest. How much more of yourself do you have left to give? How long will you keep bleeding just to keep the family myth alive? The patterns you're trapped in aren't personal. They're generational. And they didn't start with you, but they can end with you. In this video, we'll expose the hidden contracts, emotional inheritances, and invisible roles that keep you stuck. We'll talk about why your desire to heal is valid, but also why it's killing you. You're not here to save everyone. You're here to liberate yourself. And that liberation, it's not betrayal. It's the most powerful act of love your bloodline has ever seen. The invisible loyalty that keeps you trapped. There's a kind of silent loyalty that doesn't wear a name but rules your entire life. You feel it in the weight on your shoulders when your family falls apart, in the way you always say yes, even when it's killing you inside. This invisible force isn't just love. It's the unconscious hope that, maybe, if you fix everything, you'll finally be seen. Carl Jung would call it the shadow at play, pulling you to reenact pain, not from choice, but from conditioning. You're not just helping, you're bargaining with fate, trading your joy for a fragile sense of belonging. Being the strong one becomes more than a role. It becomes your identity. You're the responsible one, the one who holds it all together. But let's be real. Who's holding you? You learn that love comes with duty, that your needs don't matter if someone else is hurting. And so, without realizing it, you become addicted to being needed. Because without that, who are you? This is how the human mind, soaked in trauma, constructs its own prison and locks the door from the inside. Helping turns into chronic self-abandonment. You bend, stretch, overextend, all in the name of love. But it's not love if it costs your soul. When helping others becomes your coping mechanism, your entire inner life begins to collapse under the weight of everyone else's wounds. This isn't noble. This is self-erasure. And if you've ever thought, if I don't do it, no one will, it's because somewhere deep down, you were trained to believe that your value equals sacrifice. The pain you carry doesn't just come from what your family did to you. It comes from what you keep doing to yourself to stay loyal to their pain. That's the brutal truth. You repeat patterns, swallow your voice, ignore your needs, all because some part of you believes this is what connection is supposed to look like. But repeating the cycle won't heal the wound. It only deepens it. The mind obeys old patterns until the self, the real self, steps in and says enough. So maybe you've reached that point. Tired, confused, still trying to be good, but aching for something more. You feel the pull toward freedom, yet guilt tightens its grip. And here's the thing no one tells you. That guilt, it's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're starting to break the spell. And what if that spell, that ancient script written by pain and silence, could finally be rewritten? Maybe not for them, but for you. Unconscious contracts and emotional inheritance. Most people think they're living their own lives, but they're not. They're living out silent agreements they never actually made, playing roles passed down through generations like heirlooms. You weren't born guilty. You inherited guilt. You weren't born afraid. You inherited fear. Somewhere along the ancestral line, someone swallowed their truth, someone gave up their dreams, and someone else kept the silence, until it became your default setting. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of the unconscious dictating our lives. It's not just your shadow. It's theirs too, still living through you. You carry beliefs that never belonged to you. Maybe you were taught that speaking up means being disrespectful, that rest is laziness, that love must hurt to be real. These aren't your truths. They're emotional debts passed down like family recipes. That shame when you say no, that's not yours. That impulse to fix others at your own expense, that's not yours either. These patterns feel familiar because they're ancient, coded into your psyche before you even learn how to say I. This is the art of survival turned into identity. And the worst part, these contracts are invisible. Nobody set you down and said, you will be the peacemaker, or you'll carry the sadness your mother couldn't express. But somehow you got the message. Through glances, sighs, unspoken rules, and moments that seem too small to notice, but big enough to shape your entire being. This is how the unconscious works. Not loud, but constant. Like a script playing in the background of your every thought and choice. Then comes the guilt. Because the moment you even think about changing, that voice whispers, you're betraying your family. That's the lie that keeps you trapped. Real love doesn't ask you to stay small. Real belonging doesn't require you to bleed for connection. But breaking free means grieving who you thought you had to be. And that grief, that's the price of freedom. That's the cost of individuation. The path toward the self. The one Jung insisted was buried beneath layers of inherited survival. So you might feel torn right now, between who you are and who they needed you to be, between liberation and loyalty. But here's the truth most people avoid. These unconscious contracts weren't chosen by you, but they can be ended by you. Not with anger, but with awareness. Not with rejection, but with integration. And once you start seeing them clearly, you'll start feeling something you haven't in years. Your own mind waking up from someone else's dream. When healing others hurts yourself, there's a moment when the noble desire to heal your family turns into a slow form of self-betrayal. You start saying things like, I just want them to be okay, but deep down, you're crumbling. The very act of loving them becomes an endless loop of fixing, carrying, saving, until you can't tell where they end and you begin. Carl Jung spoke of the self as something sacred, a wholeness we must return to. But you can't return to yourself if you're always abandoning yourself for someone else's pain. The guilt hits hard the moment you pull back. It whispers, if you stop, they'll fall apart. Or worse, you're selfish. But let's be real. Who told you that loving others meant destroying yourself? That wasn't wisdom. That was emotional conditioning. Maybe you had a parent who made you their therapist. Maybe you were the glue in a family that never knew how to hold itself. So you believe your worth was measured in how much you could absorb. That's not love. That's inherited survival. You weren't born to carry everyone's brokenness. You were born to evolve. Your soul didn't come here to play a martyr. It came here to awaken. But awakening isn't clean or polite. It's messy. It's choosing boundaries that make others uncomfortable. It's walking away from roles that once made you feel special, but now just make you feel tired. And yes, it's risking being misunderstood, especially by the very people you love the most. But healing isn't about being liked. It's about becoming whole. Ironically, the one who tries to save everyone is often the most wounded. The silent warrior, the family's emotional sponge, always tuned into everyone else's needs, but completely numb to their own. And when you live this way long enough, you start to forget what joy feels like. Not just happiness, but aliveness. That spark that says, this is my life, and I deserve to feel it fully. If that sounds like something you've lost, it's time to start choosing you. Not because you're selfish, but because you're sacred. Empathy is beautiful, but empathy without limits is abandonment in disguise. And the more you abandon yourself, the more you silently teach others that it's okay to do the same. So what if the real act of healing wasn't fixing them, but finally choosing yourself? What if your exhaustion is proof that it's time to stop pouring from an empty cup? And what if the next chapter isn't about carrying their pain, but about facing the cost of healing in a system that fears change? The price of breaking patterns. When you decide to break a pattern, you're not just changing a habit, you're disrupting a whole emotional ecosystem. Suddenly, the quiet one speaks up. The helper sets boundaries. The fixer walks away, and the system panics. You're no longer playing your role in the family script, and that triggers every unhealed wound around you. Carl Jung taught that true individuation requires a confrontation with the collective, and sometimes the collective is your own family. Don't be surprised if your freedom looks like rebellion to those still enslaved by silence. They'll call you ungrateful, selfish, cold, not because you are, but because you dare to stop bleeding for their comfort. That sting you feel, it's not rejection, it's resistance, because systems prefer predictability, even if it's painful. Your healing threatens the equilibrium of dysfunction. You're not just saying no, you're saying, this ends with me. And that's terrifying for those who still need the illusion that everything's fine. So they'll guilt you, shame you, anything to pull you back into the pattern you're trying to escape. But listen, healing isn't about convincing anyone. It's about becoming. You don't owe them an explanation for your evolution. You don't need permission to grow. When you step into your truth, the need to be understood starts to fade. You stop arguing with ghosts and start living for yourself. And yes, it might feel lonely at first, but that loneliness isn't punishment. It's space. Space for new energy, new people, new purpose to finally find you. The emptiness you feel is just old noise leaving the room. Your transformation might look like betrayal to those who benefit from your stagnation. They like you quiet, compliant, available, not because they're evil, but because that's what made them feel safe. When you change, it confronts their own refusal to change. So don't expect applause. Expect silence, distance, misunderstanding. But let that be your proof. If they need you to stay broken to love you, it was never love, it was control. And now you're choosing truth instead. True healing doesn't seek validation. It seeks alignment. And as painful as it is to be labeled the difficult one, remember this. Every lineage needs a breaker. Someone brave enough to lose the family's approval to find the family's freedom. That someone might be you. And if it is, don't look back. Because the next step is not just about breaking what was, but becoming what's never been seen before. The role of the cycle breaker. Not everyone in a family is born to repeat the story. Some come to rewrite it. If you're the one who always felt different, who questioned the rules, who couldn't pretend everything was fine, that wasn't a flaw. That was your mission speaking. Carl Jung would say the self calls from the depths of the unconscious, nudging us toward wholeness. And for some, that nudge feels like fire, like discomfort, like not fitting in. But that discomfort isn't dysfunction. It's the spark of transformation, the signal that you were never meant to follow the script. You weren't sent here to carry ancestral pain like a badge of honor. You came to transmute it, to take what was passed down in silence, the trauma, the guilt, the fear, and turn it into consciousness. That's alchemy. You may not have asked for this role, but it chose you. The way you feel, everything so deeply, the way you question what others accept blindly, that's not weakness. That's sensitivity turned into power. And power, when awakened, doesn't conform, it liberates. Of course, liberation isn't welcomed with open arms. Your family may say, "You've changed," and they'll mean it as an insult. But don't shrink. That comment is confirmation. You're disrupting patterns older than your name, and that ripple is uncomfortable, not just for them, but for you too. It feels like standing naked in a room where everyone is dressed in denial. But stay there. Hold your ground. Because your courage creates space for what never had space before. Truth, clarity, and authentic connection. When you heal, you're not abandoning your lineage, you're honoring it. Not by staying loyal to its wounds, but by refusing to pass them on. Imagine a child yet to be born, whose nervous system won't carry your grandfather's rage or your mother's sadness because you did the work. That's real love. That's real service. Breaking cycles doesn't erase the past. It reclaims it. And every boundary you set, every truth you speak, becomes a thread in the new story being woven through your bloodline. So if you felt alone, misunderstood, or even cursed by the weight you carry, know this: you're not broken. You're chosen, not by fate, but by your own soul. And what you're building, quietly and courageously, is a future that never existed before. One where healing isn't just a dream, it's your legacy. And now that the fire has been lit, what would happen if you finally let it burn through everything that was never really yours? You've carried enough. The roles, the guilt, the silence, all of it. But now, the question isn't what they need from you. It's what you finally need from yourself. Are you willing to stop calling pain loyalty? Are you ready to stop bleeding just to feel like you belong? Because healing doesn't mean fixing them. It means choosing you, especially when no one else ever did. And that choice isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's the first real act of love in a lineage that forgot what love really means. So, take a breath. Right now, ask yourself, what are you still doing out of obligation that's killing your spirit? What truth have you swallowed so many times that you forgot what your real voice sounds like? You don't have to have all the answers today, but you do have to start asking the right questions. The ones that burn a little. The ones that untangle the stories your ancestors never got to rewrite. You can either keep the inheritance of pain or become the one who breaks it. If this message cracks something open in you, let it move you to action. Let it change how you show up, not just for them, but for yourself. And if this journey feels lonely, know that you're not walking it alone. There's a whole generation awakening to the same truth. Join this movement. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and be part of a space where silence ends and healing begins, one courageous soul at a time.